Hi, my name's Summer May Finlay. I'm a Yorta Yorta woman, and we are at the International Indigenous Health and Wellbeing Conference. And we've just been hearing about the Gross National Happiness Centre from Bhutan, and we've been hearing wonderful things. And I'm here with Dr. Julia Kim, who was just the keynote, Gopi and Vessel. And I'm just wondering if you can introduce yourself more in the centre.
Thank you. Maybe,
right. Hi there. My name is Gopi Karil, and I work as the communications officer for GNH Center Bhutan. It's been around 1.5 years that I work there, and this is my first time in Australia, and I'm having a wonderful time right now. Thank you.
It's a beautiful place. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
And I'm Julia Kim, and I'm the program director of the Gross National Happiness Center. I've been in Bhutan for about 6 years now, and it's a real honor to be here at the conference.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Hi all, I'm Vessel, and I've been with the center for the last 5 years. I work for the program division, and I work a lot with youths in terms of advocating on GNH. And it's been a wonderful pleasure being here at Darwin. This is our first time in Australia, but we love it.
And I have to say, the weather is particularly beautiful over these last couple of days. Dr. Kim, one of the things that you said that really stood out to me when I was listening was about the poverty of time. And you were talking about that in London. I'm just wondering if you could, just expand, because I think we don't often sit and reflect on how busy our lives are and what our lives could be like if we weren't so busy.
Well, that's a great question. I think one of the 9 areas that Bhutan measures as part of their GNH index is time use. And it's something that as we get more and more prosperous as countries and more developed, we tend to get more and more busy. And in a lot of different surveys, when people are asked how happy are they, this is an area where if they don't have some agency over their time use, they don't have time with family, friends, their reported happiness is quite low. So it's one that it's a price that we're paying, and I think you could think about it as time poor or time poverty.
Yeah. Do either of you want to comment on the time poverty aspect?
I feel that we haven't realized so much about time. I mean, as we started to travel and we meet new people, then we realize there's how much busy people have been. But actually in Bhutan we are very relaxed, and you don't have to make an appointment to go and visit your parents, friends. We just bump into someone and we just make plans immediately. So we are very relaxed, but it's a nice exposure for us to come here or to meet new people and realize that how much pressured people are in terms of time. And I'm very happy and very proud to say that we have this time use domain in our GNH philosophy. So yeah.
Fantastic.
And we've always grown up believing and knowing that it is important for us all to spend quality time with everybody who matter in your life, including your parents, friends, and everybody, because that is how you're going to grow up in a wholesome way, as a human being and also as a good citizen in the country. And therefore, I think we have this kind of very social way of looking at everything, not only in a very developmental economic sense. And this is very, very important in a social context. It's something that is there culturally embedded in us from our childhood.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's quite the same, but it's certainly what you're saying resonates with me as a Yorta Yorta woman, as an Aboriginal woman here from Australia. Time is something that, with our loved ones and our family, is a significant part of our culture. So that connection and the valuing and respecting is quite significant. And you were saying that, you just stop and make plans. It's the same with our mob. Like, it's exactly, I mean, it took a while to get you here because everyone was stopping on the way, and that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. But you also were talking about, which is something I thought, you really captured it really quite well when you talked about the ego versus the eco. And, can you just elaborate a little bit more on the two concepts and how they kind of differ from each other?
Yeah, I think you could think of them as different worldviews. So the ego worldview, which is like a pyramid with humankind and usually man at the very top, and then all of animals and nature subjugated under that, whereas an eco worldview would see man and woman embedded in a whole interdependent system that's more circular, and it isn't so hierarchical. And in that kind of model, human beings are one part of the whole living system, but they're not there to dominate and use it. They're very much influenced and nurtured by the other parts of the living system. And I find that when I was attending a lot of the sessions during the conference, it kept coming out, this world view of us and all life as being what we're looking for in terms of well-being, and also the element of spirit, that nature is not an inanimate object and a tree is not just a future desk. It has its own life that needs to be valued. It has spirit. So I think that resonates a lot with Bhutan's worldview as well.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my elders used to say, you should talk to the plants when you're watering them, because it feeds their spirit, not just the water.
It's just quite interesting what you just, since you're talking about plants and everything. Just last year we had this lady coming from Canada and asking us, do you have gods and deities in stones? Do you have gods and deities in plants and animals and everything? It's quite interesting because this is something that's always been there, that we see life form in everything that we correspond with, everywhere we go, whether it is mountains. Mountains are also named, plants are named in different way. There are certain stones and places where we can actually go and worship, things like that. I think it's one way of really introspecting within us and knowing that we're not independent. We are connected with the nature in ways that is perhaps not known to many people.
Absolutely. And one of the things you also spoke about was how, while Bhutan is very happy, you're obviously and not happy in that feeling happy, but how you were describing it before. But you were protecting the environment, and you have a very healthy environment. But your country, in that context, is under threat because of, I guess, climate change and global warming. How do you talk about that within a global context?
I think it's, on the one hand, one of the challenges that we're all facing, but it's also possibly one of the solutions, because it's something that global leaders, whether they want to admit it or not, puts all of us in the same boat. So for Bhutan to be promoting a more holistic philosophy of GNH within our own borders is important, but for us to share the message, and that's a big part of why we're so excited to come here, is then it shifts the dialogue on a global level. Because we're all vulnerable to climate change, just because Bhutan is doing really well in that respect doesn't mean we can rest on our laurels and say, job done, now we can just relax. Because we are so much influenced by the climate change that's happening around the world.
Absolutely. And not just obviously your country, but so I was over in Geneva at the World Health Assembly, and I was speaking to some Pacific Island nations, and they're extremely under threat right now with the rising seas. So, could you maybe also explain a little bit, because you were talking about you were talking right at the beginning about self, the three characters.
Three disconnects.
Yes, thank you. Could you maybe just talk a little bit more about that for those that may not have been at your presentation?
Sure. I think it's interesting. Professor Otto Scharmer, who's a thinker and a kind of a professor at MIT and the Presencing Institute, has talked about three divides or disconnects that are underlying a lot of the crises we're seeing in the world right now. And those are disconnect from self, from others, and from nature. And disconnect from self is one that people will often not think of right away, but it's a sense that we're out of touch with who we are. We don't have a sense of purpose or meaning. That the fact that we have an inner life, or that an inner life is important, is often put down. And as a result, we're seeing a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of lack of meaning in people's lives. So that's one important dimension of reconnecting in happiness, is reconnecting to ourselves. Disconnect from others is all over. So, from a macroeconomic point of view, you could say rising inequalities, the kinds of xenophobia and fear of the other that we see in many countries, and just lack of connection within our family and friends, the amount of time we spend on social media, having thousands of faceless friends who like us, but nobody's actually there when you break up with your boyfriend, or when you just found out that you've got a very bad health diagnosis. Who's there going to really listen to you and be your friend at that point? And disconnect from nature is one that we often forget about, but it's so important for a sense of well-being and survival. And yet many people, especially in urbanized areas, can't remember what it's like to just walk in the park in bare feet. No. Kids are growing up not having their hands in the mud, not knowing that milk comes from a cow, not a 2-liter bottle. And so that kind of disconnect from nature is also harmful for the self and harmful for our sense of connection to the planet.
Absolutely. Now, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know you've got to get ready for the dinner like everybody else has, because you can hear also the band performing in there. It's going to be a good night. Is there anything you'd like to add, to share?
Maybe just an extension of the question about the nature that you said, and then obviously this just reminds us about the kind of the TED talk that was given by our previous Prime Minister, where he's quite famously said that we are now a carbon negative country, right? Which means basically that we are observing the carbon and not releasing it. But then again, as you said, we still have the threat that this global change, climate change, is bringing to us. And over the last decades, we've had a couple of floods also, because there are these glaciers that are on the top of the mountains. And then there are these huge ponds and lakes that can burst open and come down. Huge waters can come down and then pose a threat to a lot of life and a lot of people there. The only reason why it can happen is because of the global change, and it is very important to know that Bhutan will be paying a price for something that it as a country is not responsible for. So I think it is very important for us all to be mindful, to work collectively as humankind, to address the issue of what is it that we can do to really collectively come together and address these issues so that we can build a better future for ourselves.
Fantastic, thank you.
I think from my side, I just want to say that at first glance you would think, what does Australia and Bhutan have to say to each other on the subject? But it's been such a rich dialogue for us, and I think for us to also go back to Bhutan with a sense that we have friends in indigenous communities as well, and that although we might not have had our paths cross if it were for a conference like this, I think shifting the dialogue, telling a new story is going to depend on us finding each other in spaces like this, and not feeling that our story is sidelined or that it has to meet the current paradigm or the current story of economic development, that there's something important and beautiful about being small and about developing slowly and about reconnecting to roots that the world really needs right now. So we're very honored and delighted to be here.
And we are honoured and delighted to have you, very much so. And I agree with you, there is a lot of connections, I think, between what you were talking about and the way we see the world as Indigenous peoples in Australia.
So thank you so much for having us here and for the opportunity. I just want to say that we are all interconnected in the sense, whatever the outside world is doing, it will be impacting Bhutan, and whatever good things are being done in Bhutan, it can be practiced in the outside world. So GNH is not only limited to Bhutan only. I would suggest that maybe you all should visit our website or go online and study more about GNH and see how can this be an alternative approach for what is happening right now. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time. Thank you.